In this video, we're going to explore what fractions are, and we're going to look at some of the most common fractions. We're also going to be just looking at unit fractions, which means the number at the top of the fraction will just be a number 1. We're going to start with looking at a half, then a quarter, then a third, then a tenth, and then finally we'll look at a seventh and a ninth together. So what is a fraction? Well, a fraction is a part of something. It's less than a whole, and it's a proportion of a set of objects, an image, or a quantity. So let's just think about all of those three statements. A part of something, it's just a piece of something. It's not all of it. It's a part of it. So if we look at the final statement, which says a proportion means the same thing. It means a piece of, a part of. Now, a fraction could be a fraction of a set of objects. It could be a fraction of a packet of balloons, a fraction of some tennis balls. It could be a fraction of a pizza, or it could be a picture. So you could have a picture and you have to shade in a fraction of that image, or a quantity. A quantity is usually a number, so it might be money or it might just be a number. Let's look at the second statement, which is less than a whole. This sometimes can confuse people. When we hear the word whole, sometimes we think about a hole in the ground or a hole in your jumper. A hole where something can pass through. When we're saying a whole, we mean one complete of anything. So one complete number, one complete box of cookies, one complete pack of pens. It's whatever the complete thing is. So if you're asked to find a fraction of a set of paper clips, well, depending on how many is in that set, if there was 32 paper clips in that set, then the whole would be that 32. Okay, so it's less than a whole, it's part of something, it's just a piece of a set of objects, an image, or a quantity. So when we look at our fractions are made up of a number at the top and a number at the bottom. Now, our numerator is the number at the top of the fraction. We are looking at unit fractions today, which means today our numerator is going to be just 1. If we look at the denominator is the number that sits at the bottom of the fraction. The denominator tells us how many equal parts our whole has been shared by. So, for example, if I take that 32, the set of 32 paper clips, so if I've got a box and every box has 32 paper clips in it, that's our whole. So with a half, those 32 paper clips would be shared into 2 groups. With the quarter, the 32 paper clips would be shared into 4 groups. Okay, so our denominator tells us how many equal parts our object, our amount, whatever it is we're finding a fraction of, our image, that tells us how many equal parts. So let's recap. With any fraction, the number on top is a numerator. The number on the bottom is our denominator. You need to look at your denominator first. Look at this first, okay? This tells you how many equal parts the whole is shared into. So the whole is how many items there are, what the number is, how many squares are in your image. So how many equal parts. You can't just separate your 32 paper clips into one group of 5, one group of 7, and then 2 groups of 10. It needs to be equal parts. That's very important. And then your numerator, we're looking at how many of those equal parts are we looking at for this particular question. Let's go through some examples. So we've got our half. So a half is 1/2. A half, if we're going to share something to a half, we need to find 2 equal groups. So to find a half, we're going to share into 2 equal groups. And then we're just going to look at one of those equal groups. Let's give it an example with a set of objects. So here we have 10 stars. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stars altogether. So to share this group of stars in half, I need to find 2 equal groups because my denominator is going to tell me how many equal groups. So my number at the bottom here tells me how many equal parts the whole is being shared into. So I need 2 groups. So what I could simply do is to move these into 2 groups. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them into 2 groups, one to the left, one to the right. So 1, 2, so I've got 2 on the left, 2 on the right, 3 on the left, 3 on the right, 4 on the left, 4 on the right, 5 on the left, 5 on the right. I started with my 10, I've put them into 2 groups. I need to check that they are equal, so is they the same in both? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I have 2 equal groups, I only want to look at one of the equal groups. If I look at one of my equal groups, I can count that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know that half of 10 is 5. Half of my stars are 5. Here we have something similar to a bar model, and here we have a row of squares, and I want to find half of it. So what I could do here, there's a couple of different ways you could do this. So 1/2 means 1 out of every 2. Now I could do it this way. I could colour in 1 and then leave this one because this is 2. So I could find my groups of 2 and I can just colour in 1 out of every group of 2. Okay. There's 1 in that group of 2, 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 and 1 in that group of 2. Altogether, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shaded. Now, you might want to do it like that, or you might want to tally, for example. So you might want to go do different colours at different ends. So I've got 1 that side, one that side, and you might want to just do that until you get to the middle. And then check that you've got the same on both sides. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You want to just be having your whole bar or your whole image or your whole set of objects. Here we've got a bar in 2 equal groups. So I've got 1 equal group on the left because I have 5, and 1 equal group on the right because I have 5 in both of them. I'm just looking at one of my groups. So in one group, there's my 2 equal groups, but in one group I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, I have the number 5. So both different ways to show how to split 10 of something into half. Let's have a look at another example now. So here I have a grid and I want to shade in 1/2 of my grid. Now you might be able to see how I could split that in half. You might straight away notice something like, I can draw a line down here and I can see that this half is the same as the other side. I can visually see that. Or you might have been able to see that I could draw a line across here and that this half is the same as the bottom half. Okay, so you might be able to see it visually. Always then double check. If you can't, you could do the same as we did before. You could colour in one, leave one, colour in one, leave one. So actually what I'm going to do here is I'm going to colour this whole row in and leave this whole row. Colour this whole row in, leave this whole row. Colour this whole row in, leave this whole row. Okay, and then I could count up how many I have. Or I could see that actually I could replace this row and put it here. And then we can see that's similar to the one we started with. Okay, whatever you do, as long as you have, for every one you've got coloured in, there's one that isn't, because it's 1 in 2, I can then count up. Now I'm going to count in threes because I can see that each row has got 3 in it. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Okay, so 18 of these were coloured in, which means 18 were not coloured in. Now in this particular problem, we're asked to shade in half of an image. We're not asked to find half of a number. So all you would need to do is just to colour it in. Let's look at this fraction now. This is one that often we might say wrong. We might look at it and say it's a fourth. This fraction is a quarter. It's important to remember that word. This fraction is a quarter. It's not 1/4. However, a quarter is finding 4 equal parts of whatever it is you're looking at, an image, a set of objects, or a number. You're dividing, you're sharing whatever that whole unit is by 4. So let's look at an example with objects. Here we have a group of cars. If I want to find a quarter of this group of cars, I need to share the whole. So this is my whole, all of them are my whole. The whole is the group of cars. I want to share them into 4. So 4 groups. So I'm going to start creating 4 groups. I'm going to have one at the top, one at the right over there. So I'm going to put them into the middle, one at the bottom and one at the bottom here. So if I put all the cars in the middle, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. Okay, so another one over here, another one over here, another one over here, and another one here. And I'm just going to keep sharing them out. After I've shared them out and I've got no more left, I need to check that it's equal. They have to be equal groups. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm happy that I have my group of cars, my whole has been shared into 4 equal groups. Okay, so the bottom part of my fraction, that's telling me how many equal groups, but my top part of the fraction tells me how many I am interested in. So if I wanted to find a quarter of that, I'm just going to look at one group. So there is my quarter. There is my quarter of the set of cars. Let's have a look using a bar model, a row. So if I wanted to find 1/4 of this, remember, I need to separate it into 4 equal groups. So I could find my bar, separate it into 4 equal groups, or I could find 1 in 4. So for example, shade 1 in, leave 3 blank. There's one group of 4. Shade 1 in, leave 3 blanks. Okay, so in every group of 4, I have 1 shaded in. That's one way to do it. The other way could be to try and group your bar into 4. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Using my times tables, I know that I could share my 8 into 4 groups of 2. 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, 4 groups. Okay, as long as you have your 4 groups and they're all equal, I'm happy they're all equal, they've all got the same amount of squares in each group. Just check I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. I'm just looking at one group. So I'm just identifying one group. And now I've identified one group. I have found 1/4 of my row. Another way you can find a quarter is a quarter is linked to a half. If I find a quarter, all I need to do is find a half, so I can see there's a half there, and then I look at my half, and then I find half of that, and there's my half there. A quarter is half of a half. Let's look at using a square now. If I want to find a quarter of this, I could do what I did a moment ago, find half of a half. So I can see, and I know from the last problem, that that is a half there. So if I want to find a half of this section here, I can also see that I could split it in half there. And there's my quarter. That's one way to do it. I could also colour in 1, leave 3. So there was 4, 1 out of 4. But then you need to be very careful that you do 1 out of 4, 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 1 out of 4. And you can see there already, it's very easy to make a mistake. 1 out of 4, 1 out of 4. Okay, so you could do it like that. That's 1 quarter. You might also be a bit more systematic if you want to keep your shading together. So I've got 1 there. I could leave these 3. There's my 4. And then I could do the same for this whole row, so this whole column. So I could do this whole column as the shades and then leave these 3 columns as the rest of my 4. So I've got 1 in 4 up to here. Now I've got 2 columns spare. So I could do 1 and then leave the 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. I could do them in groups of 4 like that. Okay, so you could do it like that. Or you might want to identify that and then bring these 3 next to it. It doesn't really matter if you're asked to shade a quarter of an object, they don't have to be together as long as the right amount is there. Okay, but if I was finding a quarter, what I would be looking at is trying to find half, as we did earlier. So your half could have been across this way first, and then trying to find half of that half like that. And then I'm just looking for 1 of the quarters. Okay, but if you can't immediately see that, then you can think about it being 1 in every 4. So 1 is shaded, 3 are not shaded. So this fraction is a third. It can be complicated with fractions sometimes because the denominator, we say it in different ways. A 2 is a half, a 3 is a third, but a 2 isn't a second and a 4 isn't a fourth. So we have to remember lots of our vocabulary for fractions because they don't all follow the same rule. So 2 is a half, 3 is a third, 4 is a quarter. After that, all the numbers do tend to follow this third rule. So we've got a third, then we've got a fifth, a sixth, a seventh, an eighth, a ninth, a 10th, an 11th, a 12th. But if you can remember, the half and the quarter follow a different rule, and remember those vocabulary, remember the names of those fractions. So when we're looking at a third, we are sharing into 3 equal parts. So let's go through an example using objects. So we want 3 equal groups. So we're going to start by sharing our objects into 3 groups. So I'm going to make a group at the top, a group over here, and a group down at the bottom. So you've just got to be careful that you're very clear. Once I've put them into my 3 groups, I'm just going to check they've all got the same amount. This has got 5, this has got 5, this has got 5. I've shared them into my 3 equal groups, and now I want to look at just one of those equal groups. So remember, you're sharing them into groups of the denominator, and then you're looking at however many groups it says at the top. I'm just looking at one, only looking at one. So you would want to circle, do whatever it asks you to do in your question. It might be circle, it might be tick, it might be say how many there are in that group. So there I have found a third of my group of ice creams. So looking at a bar model now, I want to share my bar into 3 equal groups. So I need to look at my bar and find out how many equal groups there are. If you find that tricky, I can look at my fraction. This just means 1 in every 3. So I could shade in simply just 1 in every 3. So I have 1 shaded in and 2 left. So there's a group of 3. 1 shaded in, 2 left. In that group of 3, 1 shaded in and 2 left in that group of 3. That is shading in a third of my bar because I've done 1 in every 3. Okay, or you might be able to start to use your times table knowledge, which we're going to build up on this week. My bar has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sections to it. I need to share my 9 sections into 3 groups. Now I know using my times tables that 3 3s fit in 9, so I can find my 3 equal groups like this. 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups. Okay, I needed 3 groups. I've got 1, 2, 3 groups. My bar has been shared into 3 groups, and I'm just looking at one of the bars. So just one of the bars, and I'm just going to shade in one of my groups. One of my 3 groups. You get the same answer as you did before. It doesn't matter if the squares are shaded next to each other or separately. Let's take a look at a grid now. I want 1 in every 3 shaded, or I want to share my group into 3. So one way I could do this is I could look at, I'm going to shade in 1 column, leave 2 blanks. That's 1 in 3. I'm going to shade in another column, leave 2 blanks. That's 1 in 3. Okay, I could do the same by doing that with the row. Shade 1, leave 2. Shade 1, leave 2. That's 1/3. Or I might want to count up my squares. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going across, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going down. If I do 6 times 6, that tells me how many squares there are altogether. You could count up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. But I know that because there's 6 in every row, I can just count up in 6s. Or multiply. So I have 36 in my whole grid, 36 squares in this grid, and I want to share it into 3 equal groups. Okay, if I share my 36 into 3 equal groups, I would have 12 in each group, and that's because I'm using my times tables. Okay, so when you, your goal is to get towards using your times tables. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so I'd shade 12 in because I've found how many squares there are altogether, and I've shared that into 3 groups, which gave me 12. So I know that's 1 group, and actually I can see now if I look at the image that I've got 2 rows in group 1, I've got 2 rows in group 2, I've got 2 rows in group 3. So I have separated that image into 3 groups, and I've shaded just one of the groups. Okay, so you can use it visually. You can try and use your times tables, or you can simply shade in 1, leave 2, because you need to have it in groups 3. Shade in 1, leave 2. Either way is absolutely fine, but what you're working towards is trying to use your times table knowledge. Let's have a look at a tenth now. A tenth is a really important fraction to start getting familiar with very early on. When you find your tenths, when you're familiar with them and confident with them, it's going to really help you when you come to learn about decimals and when you come to learn about percentages and just in general for lots of calculations you're going to do going on upwards in school. So finding a tenth just means to share something into 10 equal groups. So looking at a set of objects, we want to find 10 equal groups. So you could do what we've been doing earlier and separate them. Let's find 10 groups. So we're going to have to find some spaces to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This can be harder when you're doing tens because we need to find space for 10 cookies. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I put everything into the middle, so you can see that when you're finding tenths, we might need a better, more efficient method because they're getting all in the way of each other. So it's not as easy to separate my 10 groups unless you've got objects. If you've got objects in front of you, then you can move them all into the middle. So let's have a look at my groups. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we can start sharing out the cookies into our 10 groups. Remember, with this particular problem, we've not got any numbers. We're not told how many numbers of cookies. We're just simply finding a tenth of the group of objects. So we start by sharing them out into 10 groups. We need to then check, once we're done, whether there is an equal amount in each group. Okay, I am done. There's no more cookies left in the middle. If I look at each of my 10 groups, I can see there are an equal amount. Every group has got 3, so that's good. We've shared into 10 equal amounts, and now what we want to do is we want to look at just one of those groups. So I can just look at this one here. That's 1/10. So to find 1/10 of that group, I shared into 10 equal groups, and then I just identified one of those groups. So there was actually 30 cookies altogether, and 1/10 of the 30 cookies was 3 cookies. Looking at a bar model now, I need to find 10 equal groups. So I'm going to look at how many squares I've got in my bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I need to share my 10 squares into 10 equal groups. So actually, each one square, there's going to be 1 in each group. Each one is a group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I just want one of those groups. Just going to shade in one of my 10 groups. Nice and easy. We're now going to look at a 100th square, and I want to find a way to shade in 1/10. Okay, so as before, there's loads of different ways. I might shade in 1 and then make sure that there are 9 that are not shaded. So 1 shaded, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is not shaded. That whole column is a group of 10. I've just shaded one of those in. Now I'm going to be able to do the same with the one next to it. 1 shaded and I'll leave 9. 1 shaded. So I can actually do that with the whole column. You can see then I'm actually done. One column is shaded and 9 columns are not shaded. So 1 out of 10 columns are 1 out of 10 rows, are shaded. That's 1/10. 1/10 could also be this way. So this one, in each row, 1 is shaded, and then you've got 9 that are not shaded. So if this was my group of 10, 1 is shaded and 9 isn't. Okay, in 100 square, you've got 9 rows and you've got 9 columns. So that is my 1/10. Next, we're going to look at some more complicated fractions, and they really are no different to a half, a third, a quarter. The only more complicated bit about it is that the 7 times table might be one that you learn a bit later on. You might not be so confident with sharing into 7 equal groups, but the concept's exactly the same, so there's no reason why you shouldn't know about it now. So here we have a 7th, and here we have a 9th. Okay, we're going to look at our 7ths and our 9ths together. It's the same for both of these fractions. The denominator, the number at the bottom, tells us how many equal groups we need. So on the screen, I have a group of footballs, and can I share them into a 7th? Can I find a 7th of these footballs? Can I find a 9th of these footballs? So let's have a go of our 7 first. So I want to find 7 groups. So I might start by putting all of the footballs into the middle and then finding 7 groups. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, so let's start sharing the footballs out into our 7 groups. So I'm going to keep going into my 7 groups until I have run out of footballs. And I can see I'm about to run out of footballs. Okay, I've run out of footballs. I've shared all my footballs out. I need to check that they are equal groups. So I've got 3, 3, 3, 3. But I've got 2 here, and 2 here. So I can't share those footballs. I can't find a 7th of the footballs. It's not going to have a whole number. I'd have to start cutting some of my footballs in half or thirds or quarters. So I can't find a 7th of those footballs. So what about if we put them all back in the middle again and see if we can find a 9th of them? So let's find 9 equal groups. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, let's try and share them out again now. And remember, once we've shared them all out into our 9 groups, we want to double check that there are an equal amount in each group. It's very important that there is an equal amount. Okay, I've shared all my footballs, scanning around. There's 2 in every group, so there are equal amounts. There's 9 equal groups, and I only want to look at one of my equal groups because we're looking at unit fractions today. I only want one, so I could look at this one group here, circle them, identify them. I've got 2. 1/9 of those footballs was 2 footballs, and in fact there were 18 footballs altogether. 1/9 of 18 is 2. Let's look at another problem. So here I have a bar. I want to see if I can find a 7th of it, and then I want to see if I can find a 9th of it. So we'll go through the 2 different ways. As I said before, we want to move towards using times tables, but until you are at that level of confidence, you can just have a go at thinking about the fraction 1 out of 7 as 1 is coloured in my group of 7. So if I find a group of 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there's my group of 7. I'm just colouring in one of them. Let's find another group of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's another group of 7. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's another group of 7. Okay, now here all I've done is colour 1 in every 7. That is a 7th. That's a 7th of my image. Or I might want to find 7 equal groups. So if I count how many there are in my bar, there's actually 21. I need to think about how I split 21 into 7 equal groups. 21 into 7 equal groups. Okay, using my times table, I know that my answer is 3. So I think I need to do 7 groups of 3. So I'm just going to check it. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got my 7 equal groups. So this bit is correct. There's 7 equal groups. And I only want to look at one of my groups. So I'm going to shade in one group out of my 7 groups. And there we have it. Let's have a look with a 9th now. So I might want to start with thinking about colouring in 1 and leaving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's my group of 9. I've coloured in 1. So let me find another group of 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Kind of colour 1 in. And then I can see I don't have enough space for another 9 at the end there. So let's try a different way. That didn't work. I need to think about sharing my 21 squares into 9. Now 21 is not in my 9 times table. I can't share my 21 into 9, so I can't find a 9th of this bar. I could only find a 7th of it. So moving on to our final example, I have 2 grids. Which ones can I find a 7th of? Which ones can I find a 9th of? So I'm going to look at my first grid and I'm going to count. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got 9 going across and I've got 5 going down. So that tells me there's 45 in that grid. And in this one, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 going across. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coming down. That tells me there's 35. Okay, now you could use your times table knowledge, or you might have already spotted something. Now, if I look at this one, my 45 is in my 9 times table, but it's not in my 7. I can also see that there's 9 columns. So that means I'm probably going to be able to share that into 9 because there's 9 columns. But if you aren't so confident with your times tables or you can't see that visually, let's have a go at trying to divide this at finding 1/7. So if I use the method of shade 1, if I'm shading 1 in 7, I'm shading 1 and leaving 6. So shade 1, leave 6. Shade 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, leave 6. Shade 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 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 6. Shade 1, 1, 2. There's not enough. That wasn't an equal group. You can see that I can't find 1/7 of that using the shading method. I know that I can't find 1/7 of that because 45 is not in the 7 times table. 45 is not a multiple of 7. 7 is not a factor of 45. We've also proved it by trying to colour in. It doesn't work. However, 45 is a multiple of 9. 9 is a factor of 45. So I am going to be able to find a 9th. And because there are 9 in every row, I could actually just shade 1 of the 9 in each row, which means I'm going to shade a whole column. and I'm going to leave 8 columns unshaded. So that's 1 in every 9. That's my 1/9 of that shape. And I can actually see that 1/9 of 45 was 5, because there's 5 in every column. Now going to my 35 over on the right hand side, there are 7 in a row. So that means I could shade 1 and leave 6 in every row. So I could shade a whole column, because every row then starts with 1 shaded and then 6 not shaded, because this is 7. Every row is a 7. I could also, if I wasn't sure, if I'd started saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it would be the same thing. Now, what about a 9th? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's not enough, okay? I can't find a 9th of it. I've proved it by shading, but I also know that I can't find a 9th because 35 is not in the 9 times table. Okay, so hopefully you've learned a few different methods on how to find fractions of objects, of images. The most important thing to remember is when you see a fraction, your denominator, your number at the bottom, is telling you, first of all, you need to share that set of objects, that row, that image, whatever you have, you need to share it into those equal groups. So here, 7 equal groups or 9 equal groups. If it was a half, 2 equal groups. If it was a quarter, 4 equal groups. If you can't share it equally into that amount of groups, you can't find that fraction. Once you've shared those equal groups, you then just look at one of them if you're looking at a unit fraction. We'll look at non-unit fractions tomorrow. Okay, have a go at some of the questions I've put together on the worksheet. You can look at halves, thirds, quarters, fifths, tenths, sevenths and ninths. You can look at whatever ones you want to challenge yourself with today. Good luck, I hope you've learnt something new today, and I'll be back tomorrow with non-unit fractions. If you've enjoyed this lesson video, then please have a look at our website where you can sign up for access to loads more free resources to support maths learning in Key Stage 2. So that's years 3 to 6. I started doing these lesson videos in response to the school closure. We already have a year 6 app on the market, but the years 3 to 4 and 5 are all being designed especially to help you with your homeschooling. So if you want to keep up to date with more resources as I make them, then check out the website and you'll be able to sign up at www.pocketprivatetutor.co.uk. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, where I'm posting loads of different puzzles and tips and tricks that you can have a go at with your family at home. Hope you've enjoyed the lesson.